The history books taught you that monopolies died with John D. Rockefeller. They told you a comforting fairy tale that the modern global free market is open, competitive, and governed by supply and demand. But if you look at the financial architecture with clinical mathematical precision, you will realize that competition is dead. It is nothing but an elaborate marketing illusion designed to pacify the masses. Today, a single, hyper-centralized financial leviathan commands over $14 trillion in assets under management. To contextualize this financial gravity, that is more than the GDP of Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom combined. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the institutional reality of BlackRock Incorporated, the most powerful corporate puppet master in human history, quietly dictating global civilization from the shadows of Wall Street. Welcome to Wealth Wisdom Man. Today, we decode the invisible system. Every empire requires a foundational architect. For the invisible empire of shadow finance, that man is Larry Fink. In 1986, while working as a star bond trader at First Boston, Fink's team miscalculated interest rate fluctuations, resulting in a sudden, catastrophic $100 million loss. Fink was humiliated and forced out. But from that failure, an obsession was born. Fink realized that the human brain, infected by greed and fear, is fundamentally incapable of processing modern financial risk. In 1988, he co-founded BlackRock with a singular, clinical obsession: the absolute elimination of human error through data science. While other Wall Street firms relied on human intuition and high-stakes speculative gambling, Fink chose a different path. He recognized that the ultimate form of wealth strategy is not merely owning physical assets, but controlling the algorithmic infrastructure and raw data behind them. Over the next 3 decades, he systematically built a financial fortress that converted BlackRock into the structural utility of global capitalism. But Larry Fink's greatest weapon is not human. It is an artificial intelligence and risk management operating system named Aladdin. Aladdin stands for Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. It is a massive, decentralized central supercomputer network monitoring and analyzing over $21.6 trillion of global wealth every single second. Let that metric sink in. $21.6 trillion represents roughly 10% of the entire value of all stocks and bonds on planet Earth. Aladdin is a predictive monster trained on nearly 50 years of deep institutional financial history. It actively tracks global news feeds in 23 languages, processes real-time social media sentiment, and scans satellite imagery to monitor global shipping and energy levels. When a geopolitical shock occurs, Aladdin runs millions of Monte Carlo simulation scenarios across thousands of institutional portfolios simultaneously. It does not just predict market crashes, it tells central banks and sovereign wealth funds precisely where to move their capital before the human world even realizes a crisis has begun. When you walk into a supermarket or research major global industries, you are presented with the illusion of hyperchoice. You see a fierce capitalistic war between Apple and Microsoft, or Coca-Cola and Pepsi. It feels like a vibrant free market where consumers hold power. But if you execute a deep clinical audit of the institutional stock registries of these rivals, the corporate mask falls away, revealing a terrifying truth. Who is the largest institutional shareholder in Apple? BlackRock. Who is the largest institutional shareholder in Microsoft? BlackRock. Whether you check the filings of ExxonMobil, Chevron, Pfizer, or Meta, BlackRock consistently sits in the top 3 institutional owners, flanked almost identically by Vanguard and State Street. This is the modern invisible cartel. By controlling the dominant equity blocks across every competing entity within an industry, this horizontal ownership structure completely neutralizes true free market competition. The competition you see on television is nothing but an elaborate theatrical performance designed for a blind public. The definitive ascension of BlackRock to an untouchable, quasi-governmental sovereign entity occurred during the financial bloodbath of 2008. When the subprime mortgage crisis brought global capitalism to its knees, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve found themselves in absolute cognitive paralysis. The complex, toxic financial derivatives scattered across Wall Street were too tangled for human regulators to comprehend. They had no system, no computational tools, and no answers. So, who did the United States government turn to in their hour of existential terror? They called Larry Fink. The Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department essentially outsourced the financial salvage operation of the American empire to BlackRock. Through the computational power of Aladdin, BlackRock was awarded multi-billion-dollar non-competitive contracts to analyze, price, and manage the toxic assets of AIG, Bear Stearns, and Fannie Mae. In that pivotal moment, BlackRock transformed into the ultimate, indispensable utility of global capitalism, too massive to fail, and too critical to ever be ignored. But if you want to master the advanced mathematics of wealth, you must ask the ultimate clinical question: who owns the entity that owns the world? If you follow the corporate trail up the SEC filings, past the institutional algorithms, you will find that the largest institutional shareholder of BlackRock is none other than Vanguard. And if you attempt to audit who owns Vanguard, the money trail goes entirely cold. Vanguard is structured as a mutual private corporation, meaning it is owned by its own underlying funds. This legal engineering forms a perfect obfuscation matrix. It shields and completely masks the true identities of the sovereign elite, the old money dynasties and billionaires who pull the structural levers of global civilization. This is the ultimate arbitrage of absolute power. By operating behind endless layers of passive indexing and automated risk software, the modern corporate aristocracy has achieved something Rockefeller could only dream of: a flawless, invisible throne that dictates global monetary policy without ever holding a single democratic election. John D. Rockefeller understood the ultimate truth of capitalism over a century ago: true, absolute power is never visible, it is systemic. Today, BlackRock and the architects of shadow finance have perfected that clinical lesson to its mathematical limit. They do not need to fight wars or control political figureheads when they dictate the algorithmic infrastructure that moves the world's capital. In this hyper-centralized financial era, looking at political theater is a waste of your cognitive energy. The only way to survive, the only way to protect your autonomy, is to look past the marketing illusion, bypass the emotional distractions, and start understanding the cold, underlying mathematics of global wealth strategy. Stop wasting your attention on the narratives they construct for the masses. Protect your time. Invest in your mind. Subscribe to Wealth Wisdom Man, and unlock the clinical matrix of the hidden elite.